It is day 130 of the second Trump administration, and we're starting tonight with, you guessed it, money, power, politics. Today, Trump's tariffs are back on thanks to a federal appeals court. It put a pause on yesterday's ruling that blocked most of the administration's tariffs. My colleague Gabe Gutierrez has all those details.
Tonight, tariff whiplash. A federal appeals court ruling President Trump's tariffs can stay in place for now, temporarily pausing last night's ruling by the U.S. Court of International Trade that had blocked most of the president's sweeping tariffs and given the White House just 10 days to unwind them.
Three judges of the U.S. Court of International Trade disagreed and brazenly abused their judicial power to usurp the authority of President Trump to stop him from carrying out the mandate that the American people gave him.
President Trump relied on emergency powers outlined in a 1977 law to enact many of his tariffs, but the court said that use is impermissible, not because it is unwise or ineffective, but because that law does not allow it. Small businesses in a dozen states had filed the lawsuits.
It's just been surreal.
Victor Schwartz is the lead plaintiff and the founder of VOS Selections, a small New York-based wine company.
The tariffs are a cash flow killer, particularly impactful for a small business. This kind of uncertainty is terrible for business. It's impossible. You're just guessing.
The president still has other means of imposing tariffs on imported goods, and the White House says it will keep negotiating with other countries to reduce trade barriers on American products, despite the uncertainty.
Why would other countries continue these trade deal negotiations?
Because other countries around the world have faith in the negotiator-in-chief, President Donald J. Trump. And they also probably see how ridiculous this ruling is, and they understand that the administration is going to win.
So now Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is left to try and strike all of these big trade deals amid even more uncertainty. Right now, our trading partners, whose relationships with the United States affect hundreds of millions of people, are cautiously trying to figure out what in the world is next. And as the New York Times puts it, they are left to choose between chaos and hope. Once again, it seems like chaos is the only constant when it comes to Trump's tariffs. Or as Karl Rove, Republican Karl Rove, wrote in the Wall Street Journal, quote, "Maybe these apparent flip-flops were all planned by the master of the art of the deal. But to many, it just looks like cleanup on aisle 6. All right, let's bring in our leadoff panel this evening. It is a great one. Peter Baker is here, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times. Kara Lenig, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter with the Washington Post. And my dear friend Ron Insana, CNBC senior analyst. Ron, okay, today Secretary Bessent actually admitted, he said that the negotiations with China have stalled out a bit.
Yep.
How does this new court chaos make our leverage to try to negotiate even more compromised?
Well, infinitely more, I think. And I don't know that the U.S. has ever had the leverage that the president thought in the first place.
Bingo.
I think this has been a problem and a delusion from the start, as if we have, yes, one of the largest consumer market in the world. That's important. But do we have the type of negotiating leverage that you can prevent imports from coming into the United States, to make automobiles, to import wine, to import foods, to do all these things that we do in hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars every single year? This complicates things considerably from here, and it's now going to go to the Supreme Court to determine whether or not the president does have these, to a certain extent, extra congressional authorities to impose the tariffs that were called into question 24 hours ago.
Peter, how are other countries handling these constant changes?
Well, look, I think they don't know what to make of it, obviously. They're not experts in our legal system. They don't understand what laws the president can and cannot invoke when it comes to these tariffs. And what they've seen is, on any given day, the bottom line seems to be the opposite it was the day before, whether because of legal challenges or because of the president himself, right? Just the other day, he said 50% tariffs on European Union. Whoops, a day later, no, let's not do that. Even this ruling that got stayed today didn't cover certain tariffs on automobiles and others that were invoked under a different law. So I think it's very confusing for trading partners, and they don't know where it's going to end up. And because you don't know where it's going to end up, like your wine dealer said in the interview earlier, you don't know what kind of plans to make as a business. You don't know what kind of plans to make as a trading partner. You don't know what kind of deals you need to make because you don't understand exactly where the president might decide his policy is going to be. You don't know where understand the courts are going to allow him to do it.
Carol, I want to play what longtime Trump ally Jason Miller said earlier today about the original ruling that blocked the tariffs. Watch this.
We have these unelected judges who are trying to force their own will when it comes to tax policy, trade policy, and all matters of the economy. The global elites don't mind that American industries are being wiped out, that American workers are being wiped out, and it also directly undermines the will of the American people. 77.3 million people, 312 electoral votes, winning the popular vote, who voted for President Trump to put these exact policies in place. And what this ruling does is overturns that.
Okay, Carol, even tonight, Trump himself on his social media platform attacked Leonard Leo, right? One of the biggest conservative voices, activists, funders out there, called him a sleazebag who probably hates America. He went after Leonard Leo. He went after the Federalist Society for these judges. What do you make of this?
You know, I think it's so interesting, the attack on judges and courts when they rule in a way that Donald Trump doesn't like. And Jason Miller is making this very good PR point of like, these are unelected judges, but there are laws in our country, and they are underlining the laws here, which require that in order to have this kind of broad tariff imposition, you have to have some sort of emergency, national emergency, something that's a real threat. And the president and the White House have not established that. And so that's what the law says. In fact, a former clerk to Neil Gorsuch literally just told one of our reporters for the story that we broke today that this is likely going to fail for Donald Trump in the Supreme Court. Now, I'm not predicting that. I'm citing a very smart judicial insider who's saying, you know, there's a reason why courts are turning this down. The stay by the appeals court, not to get geeky, but the stay is basically saying, okay, look, we've got an argument, we've got a dispute, let's hold up, let's hear the arguments. But it's just like birthright citizenship, which Donald Trump fought, and it's just like due process, which Donald Trump fought in trying to deport / render various immigrants and take them out of our country and send them to prisons in El Salvador. There are laws in this country, and just because judges cite them and refer to them and underpin them doesn't mean that they're unelected and unruly and crazy.
All right, well, I prefer to get geeky because Jason Miller said something today that just doesn't make sense. He said these tariffs are going to prevent American industries and workers from being wiped out. He said that today. On the very same day, we heard from Gap stores that if the tariffs are still going to be in place, that could cost them $100 to $150 million. How do you square? I mean, what Jason Miller is saying has no connection to reality.
NVIDIA is going to lose $8 billion in a quarter because of the tariffs that are being imposed, right? And this is one of the premier companies, the second most valuable company in the world behind Microsoft. So look, this has become an administration, as it was the first go-around, one of hyperbole. They always use this type of hyperbole. People are going to be wiped out. We have an unemployment rate that is 4.2%. What are we wiping out? I mean, we're at near historically low levels of unemployment.
You want to wipe something out? They're called small businesses.
Yeah,
and the
which is what they're in the process
of
doing, absolutely, with the tariffs and with other moves that they've been undertaking as well. And so, listen, Jason is nothing close to an economist, so he has no idea what he's talking about when he's discussing what the impact of these tariffs would be on the economy. And if they were imposed, and if they were imposed for the long term, as you say, it would affect not just the businesses, but we've talked about this before, consumers, consumer prices. It's very interesting. Larry Tribe on Lawrence O'Donnell's show brought up a very interesting point that if all this were rolled back, the government then has to refund the tariffs to businesses, but consumers won't get any refunds that they've already paid on tariffs that have transpired.
My goodness.
I mean, this is just so utterly chaotic and ill-thought, ill-conceived from the get-go, that it becomes increasingly difficult to see, as we've said many times before, what the actual end game is in all of this.